Hello there everybody and welcome to this Astranti financial training video for the February 2019 strategic case study on Vita. And this is the industry analysis video, so we're going to be talking about some of the key issues, some of the key trends and developments that are impacting on the industry and the companies like Vita operating within it. So to start with, we'll just talk quickly about what to expect from this analysis. So how to use this analysis in order to gain marks in your exam and why it's so important to have a good understanding of the industry. And then we'll quickly run through a brief introduction to the industry. So looking at some of the history and the key products before moving on to look at customers and marketing, production, research and development and supply, and then addressing the key stakeholders in the industry and corporate social responsibility. So what are the key ethical issues? What are the key environmental issues, sustainability issues, staffing and human resources issues affecting the industry? Before drawing some comparisons between Vita and a real world competitor. So in this case, we have chosen Fitbit. Then we'll move on to look at some of the key industry issues. So these are political and legal issues, any economic trends or customer trends affecting the industry, before looking very briefly at the 25 industry examples. And these examples are included so you have some really good examples that you can use in your exam answers. So to start with then, let's address the issue of why it's so important to have a good understanding of the industry. And the reason is because the case study is designed to test your application in the real world. So it's not just about your theoretical knowledge. You need to show you've got a wider understanding and an ability to apply that knowledge. So you're a senior finance manager at Vita. So that means you should have a good understanding of the types of issues in the real world and the types of decisions that real world companies are making. So this industry analysis pulls together lots of different information about those key trends, those key issues, and those key developments that are affecting the industry that you in your role as a senior manager at Vita would be expected to be made aware of. Okay. So that's why the industry analysis is so important, and it's worth saying that in this video, I'm not going to be talking through every single paragraph in detail. I'm just going to be picking out some of those key pieces of information that it's useful to be familiar with, to be aware of in your exam. But first and foremost, it's important that we have a good understanding of what we mean by wearables. And essentially, wearables are any smart electronic device that are worn on the body. And they're used to connect with and share data with a range of other devices or vehicles or appliances. So there's a whole range of uses for consumers. So not only audio functionality, but there's fitness tracking capabilities, the ability to make calls and check emails, but there's also wider commercial applications. So examples include in healthcare or in education or transportation. And what this is showing us that there's a huge amount of scope and opportunities in the industry in wearable technologies. So as you probably know, wearables are a fairly modern piece of technology. These devices have only really come onto the market, become available to consumers in recent years. So although we can trace the very early origins of wearable technology back to the first pair of glasses in 1286, it's really the later part of the 20th century where we need to look to understand the way in which the wearable industry as we know it today has really started to take shape. So, for example, we can trace it back to the first calculator wristwatch in 1975, the Walkman in 1979, and digital hearing aids which first became available in the 1980s. These are more recognisable as wearable devices as we know them today. But although these devices are essentially the origins or the foundations of the industry, it's actually only been within the last 15 to 20 years that wearable technology has started to achieve mainstream popularity. And actually nowadays, new wearable innovations happen almost every month. And it's been in the last 2 decades really that iconic devices like the GoPro, the Nike Plus, Fitbit, Google Glass have been released. And the reason that these devices have now started to achieve mainstream popularity and that technological innovations are happening more and more frequently is because of the growth in mobile networks. So this has been central to the development of wearable technology. There's a greater ability to connect and share data between devices. Information systems and data sharing systems are much more sophisticated, have a greater amount of functionality, are much quicker and accessible. And so now a whole industry devoted to the development of different apps and different platforms to work with wearable technologies has evolved. So we can see that in recent years, the wearable technology industry has really started to accelerate in terms of its growth and its prominence. And this wearable tech timeline just highlights the fact that in recent years, the number of devices coming to the market is increasing year on year. But what does this mean for the future? Well, wearable technologies present a significant opportunity for businesses, both in terms of new markets and in terms of data collection. So this is saying that businesses are able to utilize wearable technology to be more efficient, to be more effective, to understand consumer trends, to understand consumer wants and needs, and to connect with their customers. And they can use the data that they obtain to create more effective pricing strategies, to target new products more effectively, and a whole range of other advantages. Now, there is one prominent disadvantage, and it's one key challenge to the industry, and that is the issue of data privacy and data protection. That is going to increase in prevalence over the coming years. We've already seen in recent years a number of high-profile security breaches. Customers are becoming increasingly concerned with how their data is being used and how it's being stored and how secure it is. And so this is a key challenge to the industry. Companies need to be able to show they've got effective systems in place to keep data secure. This is even more important when we consider devices which are used to track very personal metrics like health and fitness, for example. But on the plus side, the willingness of people around the world to use this technology shows that there's going to be a continued popularity. The market's expected to grow, and there's going to be increasing opportunities for companies that are operating in the market. So there are a number of key ideas that we can draw from the history of the wearables industry related to Vita. And the first is that Vita may seem like a relatively immature company. They're only founded in 2011. But the overall industry is extremely young. So in fact, Vita are more established than we initially may have assumed. But what's more interesting is the rate at which new innovations and devices are being released. And this is interesting in 2 different ways. We can interpret this in 2 different ways. Firstly, it could be seen as hugely positive for a company like Vita. It shows there's an increasing appetite among consumers for these types of devices, so the market is expected to grow. On the other hand, it could be seen as a potential issue because it means more and more companies are increasing their offering and becoming present on the market. The number of devices on the market is increasing, which means customers have more choice, more ability to demand better products for lower prices. So in order to remain competitive, companies like Vita need to make sure they're able to release new and innovative products that meet their customers' demands. And as well as facing competition from specialist consumer electronics industry companies like Fitbit, there are a number of different companies that are diversifying their product ranges. So we've got examples here of Google, Samsung, and Apple. So these are consumer electronics companies and technology companies that are widening the services and products that they offer and staking a claim in the wearables market. And so companies like Vita need to make sure they're able to retain their market share and remain competitive by releasing new and innovative products that meet consumer demands. So we've touched on some of the key products available on the market, but let's just run through some of the devices available in a little bit more detail, starting with fitness and activity trackers, which is the core market that Vita are focused on. And these devices are designed to help a user measure and track key metrics related to their health and fitness. Now, devices worn on the wrist are the most common devices used for this purpose, but there's also a number of other devices on the market, so things like smart clothing, ear and eyewear, for example, and these are growing in popularity. Now, as well as the basic functionality, so tracking metrics like heart rate and step count, there's also software available that can allow users to optimize their running routes or receive personalized coaching, analysis and recommendations, which further enhance the user experience. Now, as I've said, the most common form of fitness and activity trackers are worn on the wrist, and we can see that smartwatches and wristbands are the largest segments of the wearables market. And perhaps more interestingly is the fact that over the next 4 years, we can see that smartwatches are expected to continue to increase. So the number of units being sold is expected to increase year on year. But with wristbands, we can see it's actually expected to remain fairly consistent. And that's a slight worry for a company like Vita, who focus solely on the fitness and activity wristband market. We can see that there's not going to be a huge amount of growth in this market. So this is something that we're going to be coming back to time and time again, and that's the threat that smartwatches have to Vita's core product offering. So just very quickly touching on the wristwear market then, as we've said, we've got wristbands. So these are basically the fitness trackers that contain functionality that detects movement, temperature, altitude, for example, and can therefore measure a huge range of metrics like distance traveled, the number of minutes that you're active for, how many flights of stairs you've climbed, for example, heart rate, and lots of other things. But these wristbands only have fitness and activity tracking functionality, and that's really important when we compare this to a smartwatch. So a smartwatch is effectively a wearable computer in the form of a wristwatch. So it's very, very similar to a traditional fitness or activity wristband, but it's got a lot more added functionality. It's got the same functionality at the front end that's similar to a tablet or a smartphone. So potentially the user can use it to respond to their text messages, view emails, or receive social media notifications, for example. And the prediction is that by 2020, smartwatches will overtake activity trackers in popularity. And as I touched upon, this is a key concern for a company like Vita, who operate in the activity and fitness tracker wristband market solely. They don't have any smartwatches at present, and so smartwatches pose a key threat to companies like Vita, who focus solely on fitness and activity tracking wristband, because consumers are increasingly wanting more from their devices. They're desiring that added functionality that a smartwatch can provide. Okay, so we're going to be focused predominantly on the wristwear market because that is where Vita are most active, but there are a huge range of other devices available on the market, and it's useful to be familiar with them, to be aware of them, because they could present opportunities for diversification in the future for Vita, or it could be the fact that we consider them to be a competitive threat. As we've said, smartwatches are set to grow in popularity, and this is true of some of the other types of devices that we're going to address now. And so they pose a threat in terms of Vita's overall market share. So one other type of wearable device that is growing in popularity is smart garments, and essentially these are just items of clothing which have technology embedded within them. So this can either be a smart garment that has a sensor attached, it could be a product that has a sensor in the garment, or in fact there are some wearables where the garment is the sensor itself. So there are a range of different companies that are operating in the market already, developing the technology for smart garments. Smart glasses are another form. So these may have functionality to control and receive data from other devices and support wireless technologies like Wi-Fi and GPS. And these are essentially more prominent in areas like entertainment and gaming, But in the future, there are some companies that are developing devices that contain GPS and the ability to track steps, distance, calorie burned, for example. So that is a direct competition to the devices that Vita currently offers. Now, we've talked about health and fitness, but there's also the application to professional sports and smart sports equipment. So increasingly there's a demand for performance analysis in professional sport, and that means a number of manufacturers have started developing smart sports equipment which can provide technical feedback for specific sports. So not only tracking things like calories burned and steps, those very basic metrics that we know fitness and activity trackers pretty much on the whole all contain, these devices can actually provide more detailed insights about things like technique and form and performance. And there are a range of different examples, like a smart basketball, which can track how well a user's shooting. There's smart tennis rackets, which can measure things like serve speed, the number of shots that a user takes, and a smart football, which can detect speed, flight, spin, and strike data, for example. So we can see there's a huge range of applications in the field of professional sport. And other companies are also producing smart scales. And these are a complementary product to fitness and activity trackers. They're designed to help the user track weight, body fat percentage, bone density, muscle mass, for example. And all of this can be synced over Wi-Fi and Bluetooth to different apps to provide a more complete view of a user's health and well-being. And this, similarly to fitness and activity trackers that we've talked about, also contains the functionality to provide personalized tips and personalized coaching advice to help a user hit their goals. Now, all of these devices work on the premise that the data from them can be used to provide meaningful insights to the user. And so there are a huge range of apps and a huge range of websites that are available in order for a user to access detailed data analytics and to further enhance the user experience. And an interesting stat shows that health and fitness apps actually increased over 330% between 2014 and 2017. And it shows that users are actively engaging with these apps. So 75% of users open their apps at least twice a week, and 25% actually use them more than 10 times a week. So that's showing that there's a real appetite among consumers to be able to track and measure different analytics that can be drawn from these devices. So here we've just got an example of the Fitbit app, and you can see there's the ability to track things like steps, distance, calories burned, and also the ability to connect with friends. And this social dimension in terms of community pages and leaderboards is an increasing functionality among many apps that are on the market. So we've talked about professional sports very briefly, so I won't go into too much detail there, but we've also got another application, and that is healthcare. And that's something that links directly to the health and fitness benefits that you can obtain by using these devices. The number of metrics that can be tracked naturally has applications in healthcare. So things like heart rate, calories burned, blood pressure, for example, they can all be used to help a user monitor their health. And it's actually predicted that the global market for medical wearable devices, so devices that are specifically designed and tailored towards helping people manage medical conditions, is going to reach 12.1 billion across the world by 2021. And not only can it help users track their medical conditions, it can aid the remote monitoring of patients by medical professionals, provide real-time access to health records, and enable quicker diagnosis and treatment of conditions. So it's overall adding to the efficiency and the effectiveness of global healthcare systems. So we've touched upon the different devices available, and we've touched upon some of the different companies that are operating in the industry, but it's worth just highlighting that there are a multitude of different companies participating in the wearable device market. So there's broad consumer electronics companies, there's specialized consumer electronics companies, and we've actually got some traditional watch companies also operating in the market. Now, in the first 6 months of 2018, there were 5 companies that accounted for over half of the risk-based wearables market. And lots of the examples you'll see throughout this analysis are drawing upon these companies. So we've got Apple as the number 1, and this is predominantly through the sale of their Apple Watch. And we've got other consumer electronics companies like Xiaomi, and we've also got technology companies like Garmin featuring the top 5. And as well, we've got Fitbit. And Fitbit are focused very much like Vita on the fitness and activity tracking market. So on the whole then, we can see that actually consumer electronics companies and technology companies are taking up a huge amount of the market share. And specialist companies like Fitbit have actually seen their market share decrease over recent years. And as well as the companies that are producing the hardware, there is a number of different companies working to produce apps. So not only the apps that are produced by the companies that make the devices, so Apple, for example, has its own apps, Fitbit, again, its own app, Garmin, again, also has its own apps. There are a range of different standalone health and fitness related mobile apps that exist that can be purchased or downloaded through the app stores on a range of different devices that are compatible with a number of fitness and activity trackers and smartwatches. So we can see there's a huge range of different devices here that are compatible with the Fitbit, for example. So what does all of this mean for Vita? Well, we know that Vita, as we've said before, designs and manufactures fitness and activity trackers. Now, many of the features that Vita offer in terms of their products appear to be fairly standard across the industry, but we can actually see that some companies are producing more sophisticated products, so things like swim tracking or female health tracking and guided breathing. So that suggests that Vita actually has some scope to improve the range of features that they currently offer in their products. Now, the pre-scene doesn't mention any complementary products or accessories that Vita offers, and that lies in direct contrast with companies like Garmin or Fitbit, who we know offer smart scales and also offer products like wireless headphones. And we also know that lots of different companies offer customizable options, so customizable straps, customizable casings for the devices, but there's no mention of this in the pre-scene, so we can't assume that Vita does this, and this could be another area where the company might wish to look to develop. Now, as with the features that their products include, Vita's app and website is also fairly typical. So we know it's got personalised dashboards, it also contains motivational advice and guidance and social interaction features that we've talked about earlier. And the pre-scene also tells us that Vita's trackers are compatible with other third-party apps. So we know this is a feature that Fitbit, for example, has, and this improves the user experience. It improves the functionality of their devices and is a good selling point. Now, moving on to competitors, we know that Vita as a company focus solely on developing and manufacturing fitness trackers. And we've talked about how there's a huge amount of competition. The market is becoming increasingly competitive, and broad and specialized consumer electronics companies, watch companies, and other niche fitness wearable manufacturers are gaining market share, especially those companies who are producing smartwatches. And we can see how smartwatches has negatively impacted on the overall market share that Vita has of the wearables market in recent years. Now, we'll come on to competitors a little later, but it's worth noting at this point that the company that seems to most resemble Vita is Fitbit. And we'll use Fitbit as an example throughout. They're another niche fitness wearables company that focus solely on fitness and activity trackers. So they're a really good real-life comparator to Vita that you can utilize throughout your exam answers to draw comparisons to of relevant issues that are affecting the company in the industry. So I hope you enjoyed that sample of the SCS industry analysis video, but before we end, there are a couple of other products that we at Astranti provide that I'd like to draw your attention to, which we believe will be hugely beneficial for you in your preparation for the case study exam and give you the best chance of passing. So we offer 2 study texts which provide key pieces of advice geared towards passing the the case study. So we've got study text 1, which covers your role, how to analyse the pre-scene, exam preparation, writing approach and time management advice, as well as study text 2, which summarises the most commonly examined topics from the OT exams. And we've also got a full set of course videos which show you what it takes to pass the exam. So again, we talk about planning and writing advice and how the case study is marked. Now we've got a full range of pre-scene analysis materials, and these pick out key information from the pre-scene, apply the key theories and models to the pre-scene scenario, and highlight the top 10 issues likely to come up in your case study. Now, we've seen it's really important you can show you have fully understood the pre-scene industry and apply all of that knowledge in the exam. And so the industry document and video essentially provide you with the tools to do this. Now, we also provide mock exams which are tailored to the pre-scene based on the topics most likely to appear in your exam, and we provide additional marking and feedback which will allow you to see your strengths and your weaknesses and get advice from a SEMA tutor on how you can improve. Now, our masterclasses are a live online study environment and they're fully interactive, and this allows you to ask questions and clarify your understanding. And because we believe that our case study course contains everything you need to pass your exam, we have a pass guarantee. So essentially, if you get to results day and you haven't passed, but you've purchased and completed our full course, then we will enrol you on the next course free of charge as part of our pass guarantee. So you can see we offer a huge range of materials, all designed to maximise your chances of passing the exam. So head over to our website and check out what we have to offer. Thank you very much. Bye bye.